The week passed in a blur of routine. The sun rose and set, and each day mirrored the last. Unremarkable, quiet, almost too quiet. It was the kind of peace that Jing had never fully trusted. There was no chaos, no sudden surprises, no signs that the world outside their little bubble was still spinning with danger. Yet something about this calm sent a ripple of unease through his mind. Sora, Viridia, Kaori, and Valel returned to school, as usual, their days filled with lessons, training, and the occasional playful banter. The classes for energy users ran smoothly, with Sora's focus on mastering finer points of energy control and Viridia, despite her struggles, keeping up with her swordsmanship. Kaori spent her afternoons perfecting her healing spells, ever precise, ever calm. Valel, always the laid-back one, went about his studies without much fuss. At home, there was no sign of any disruptions. Evie kept to her work, Jing took care of the usual duties, and the kids moved through their days with an almost mechanical sense of order. Yet for Jing, there was an underlying current, an unsettled feeling he couldn't shake. He went through the motions, kept up appearances, but in his mind, the questions lingered. His instincts had been on high alert for days now, watching, waiting for something to happen. The mornings began the same way. Jing made breakfast, Evie sat at the table, and the kids slowly trickled in, half awake and shuffling about. Jing's eyes, though, never rested. He took in everything. A bird fluttering past the window, the creak of the door as Valel entered late, the way Sora's gaze flickered toward the door, as if expecting someone to arrive, the faintest change in the air, too subtle for anyone else to notice. The signs were all there, but what they meant Jing couldn't yet decipher. The house felt different. It wasn't just the odd stillness in the air. It was the way the walls seemed to hum, like they were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Evie noticed too, though she never said anything. She'd catch him looking out the window, eyes distant, and then quickly return to whatever task he was focused on. She knew him too well, knew when something was wrong, even when he refused to admit it. But Evie was patient, and for the time being, she said nothing. Kaori was the next to notice. She had always been the most intuitive of the kids, and her sharp gaze missed little. One evening, as they gathered around the table after dinner, she caught Jing staring out the window, his expression unreadable. Her gentle voice broke the silence. "Jing, is everything okay?" Jing shifted slightly, pulling his thoughts back into the present. He gave her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just tired, Kaori. Nothing to worry about." Kaori didn't press, but she wasn't fooled. She could see the way his fingers drummed against the edge of his cup, the tension in his shoulders, the way his mind seemed to be elsewhere. But she respected his space, as she always did, and didn't pry any further. Viridia, however, was less inclined to let things go. She leaned back in her chair, her blue-green eyes narrowing as she studied him. "You're not fooling anyone," she said bluntly. "You've been off. What's going on?" Jing glanced at her, his face momentarily betraying the faintest trace of frustration before he masked it with a calm expression. "Viridia, I'm fine. Just focusing on something," he said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. But Viridia wasn't having it. She leaned forward, her fiery spirit refusing to let the matter drop. "If something's bothering you, you know you can tell us, right?" she pressed. "We're family." Jing met her gaze for a long moment, his mind running through the options. He could tell them everything, but something told him it wasn't the time. Not yet. "I know," he replied softly. "But there's nothing to worry about. I'll let you know when there is." Viridia huffed, clearly not satisfied, but decided to drop it. She cast a glance toward Sora, who seemed unusually distracted, his eyes flicking between the door and the window. "Okay, but don't think I won't notice next time," she muttered, crossing her arms. Sora just grinned, though there was a faint unease in his smile. That night, after the dishes were done and everyone settled into their rooms, Jing remained in the living room, staring out the window. The sky had darkened, but it wasn't the nightfall that kept his gaze fixed. It was something else. The air felt heavy, like a storm was just about to break, even though the world outside remained still and calm. He couldn't afford to relax. Not yet. He had a bad feeling about the days ahead, a feeling that whatever peace had settled over them was merely a lull in something far more dangerous. As he sat there in the quiet, his thoughts lingered on the same restless feeling. He had told himself to remain vigilant, to prepare for whatever might come, but the silence made it harder to keep his guard up. The calm was almost too perfect. But it was only when Evie slipped quietly into the living room that Jing let his guard down, just a fraction. She stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment, before softly asking, "Jing, is everything really okay?" He didn't turn to face her immediately, as if waiting for something to change before he spoke. Finally, he looked over his shoulder, his gaze warm but distant. "I'm fine, Evie," he replied, his voice steady but tinged with something she recognized, a subtle edge of worry. "Just thinking." Evie took a step closer, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the truth behind his words. Before she could ask again, the soft creak of the stairs caught her attention. She glanced toward the hallway just in time to see Sora's head peek around the corner. His eyes widened briefly, as if caught, before he quickly ducked back out of sight. Evie's eyes flickered back to Jing. He heard, didn't he? Jing nodded, his lips pressing into a thin line. It doesn't matter, he's not the only one. They both understood the silent weight of that exchange. Sora, despite his usual carefree demeanor, was sharp. And with the kids involved, it was only a matter of time before they'd notice more than Jing intended. But for now, there was little they could do except wait. The silence stretched between them, each of them lost in their own thoughts. But the moment passed without further words. Evie quietly sat beside him, offering the quiet comfort of her presence. And for that moment, the weight on Jing's chest lightened just a little. The morning sun filtered softly through the trees as the kids made their way to school, the crisp air of early spring carrying the promise of a new day. As usual, they walked together, a group of 4 with one distinct straggler, Sora, who lingered behind, eyes darting between his friends. His thoughts were a million miles away from the light chatter around him. Sora had heard more than he was meant to. Overhearing his conversation with Jing and Evie had set his mind spinning, and the more he thought about it, the more unsettled he became. Jing, normally the picture of calm, had a crack in his armor, a rare thing, something Sora hadn't seen in a long while. He needed to talk about it, but with whom? Viridia was the first to notice his quiet, brooding pace. She slowed, casting him a sidelong glance. "You're awfully quiet today, Sora," she remarked, her voice teasing but with a hint of concern. "You feeling okay?" "I'm fine," he muttered, but even he could hear the strain in his voice. Sora could be many things, competitive, daring, even reckless, but lying wasn't his strong suit, not to the people who knew him best. Kaori, who had been walking ahead, turned around to look at him, her brow furrowing. "Is everything all right? You seem off." Sora hesitated. He couldn't keep it inside anymore. "I overheard something last night," he said quietly, glancing at each of them to gauge their reactions. "It was about Jing." Viridia raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What about Jing?" Sora glanced over his shoulder as if making sure no one was listening, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I heard Evie ask him if everything was okay. He said he was fine, but there was something in his voice. Something wasn't right. He's been acting weird the past few days, like he's on edge. He didn't want us to notice, but I could tell." Kaori frowned, looking from Sora to Viridia. "Jing's always been calm, but you're right. He's been distant lately. He's usually so open with us." Viridia, however, was more skeptical. "Yeah, but you're jumping to conclusions. Jing's tough. He probably just had a lot on his mind. Why would he hide something from us?" "Exactly," Sora shot back, a bit more impatient than usual. "That's just it. He always has something on his mind, but this felt different. You don't just go quiet around the people you trust unless something's wrong." "I don't know," Kaori said softly, considering his words. "It's not like Jing to let us worry, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more to it either." The group walked in silence for a few moments, the weight of Sora's words hanging in the air between them. It wasn't like them to pry into Jing's affairs. He was always the protector, the one who looked out for them. But hearing that something was troubling him, it didn't sit right. Viridia was the first to break the silence, her usual boldness returning. So what now? Do we confront him or just wait it out? We can't just wait it out, Sora replied firmly. We need to find out what's going on. Jing's been keeping something from us, and we have to figure out what. That's dangerous, Kaori murmured, her voice tinged with concern. What if we push him too hard? Jing's always had his reasons for keeping things from us. I know, Sora admitted. But I can't just pretend nothing's wrong. Viridia snorted. You've never been good at pretending. Her teasing smile softened, though, as she placed a hand on his shoulder. All right, but if we're doing this, we do it carefully. We don't want to make things worse. Sora nodded, the weight of their shared decision settling on his shoulders. He had no idea what they would find, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, and they needed to be ready for it. As they reached the school gates, the conversation died down, the usual school day distractions starting to take hold. But for Sora, the quiet unease still lingered. What was Jing hiding? And how much longer could they keep pretending everything was okay? As the conversation dwindled, the kids fell into a more familiar rhythm, their thoughts scattered between school and their lingering worries about Jing. The streets began to grow busier, with other students heading in the same direction, but the air felt unnaturally still around their group. Viridia kicked a pebble down the sidewalk, her energy still buzzing from the earlier exchange. So, we're agreed then? She asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. We keep an eye on Jing, but we don't push too hard. Kaori nodded, her fingers gently tugging at the strap of her bag. We need to be careful, but if something's going on, we'll be there for him. Sora was quiet, still lost in his thoughts. He kept glancing back as if expecting someone, or something, to appear behind them. His unease had only grown since last night. Something felt wrong, and the closer they got to school, the more he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sudden chill in the air snapped him out of his thoughts. He stopped walking, his breath catching in his throat. Viridia, who had been a few steps ahead, turned back to look at him. What is it, Sora? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned the street ahead, narrowing as he searched the quiet space in front of them. His pulse quickened. There, standing just a few yards ahead, was a figure, a person cloaked in a dark, tattered hood, their face obscured by the shadows of the fabric. They were standing still, as though waiting for something, or someone. The others stopped, following Sora's gaze. At first, it was hard to tell if it was just another student, maybe someone new at school. But the figure didn't move, didn't react to the distant hum of voices or the hustle of students walking by. The way they stood there, completely still, sent an uneasy shiver through Sora's spine. Who's that? Viridia asked, her voice low, a slight edge of suspicion creeping in. I don't know, Sora muttered, his voice tight. But something's off. Kaori looked around. Is anyone else seeing this? Yeah, there's no way that's just a random person, Viridia added, squinting toward the figure. They've been standing there for a while. The figure didn't seem to notice them at all. It stood there, unmoving, staring down the street with an eerie focus. The wind picked up slightly, but the figure's cloak stayed still, as if it were part of the very air itself. Sora took a cautious step forward. Should we go around them, or... Let's not make a scene, Kaori said quickly, her voice low but firm. She glanced at Viridia and Sora, her expression thoughtful. We'll just keep walking. If something's wrong, we'll know soon enough. The group hesitated, but as they started to move forward again, the figure's head turned slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if sensing their approach. The motion was so subtle, so controlled, that it only added to the eerie sense of being observed. For a long moment, it seemed like the figure was waiting for them to come closer, almost like it was expecting them to reach it. Then, without a word, the figure shifted. In a fluid motion, they stepped back into the shadows of a nearby alleyway, disappearing just as quickly as they had appeared. Sora's heart raced. "Did you see that?" he whispered urgently. "Yeah," Viridia muttered, her hand resting instinctively on the hilt of her sword. "Something's not right." "I don't like this," Kaori said, her voice barely above a whisper as she quickly glanced over her shoulder. "We should hurry." The kids exchanged uneasy glances, but they quickened their pace, their footsteps echoing in the growing silence of the street. The figure was gone, but the unease it had left behind remained. Sora couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was following them. Something much darker than they had anticipated. The air grew heavier with each step as they approached the alley. Sora could feel the tension tightening around them, the city's usual hum fading to a distant, uneasy buzz. The others walked quietly, each lost in their own thoughts, their unease matching the shadows that seemed to thicken ahead. The alley was narrow and dark, a place that felt alive with waiting. Sora tried to shake the gnawing feeling crawling up his spine, but it clung stubbornly. He glanced sideways at Viridia. "Something's off," he muttered. Viridia's eyes flickered toward him, her hand drifting instinctively to the hilt of her sword. "I know, but danger isn't new to us." Her voice was steady, yet there was a faint tremor beneath it. Kaori, walking beside them, was less composed. She kept looking back over her shoulder as if expecting something to leap out. "I've never felt like this before," she said softly. "Like something's waiting for us, but I don't know why." Valel, trailing behind, was unusually quiet. His sharp eyes scanned every inch of their surroundings, his body taut. "We should have seen something by now," he said cautiously. "No one should be lurking this openly." Sora nodded. "It's just an alley. We'll pass through and—" Before he could finish, a violent explosion of energy tore through the air behind them. A shockwave slammed into their backs, stealing their breath and throwing them forward. The ground seemed to shake beneath their feet. Valel was quicker. His energy flared into a brilliant shield, absorbing much of the blast's force. His body trembled with the strain, but he stood firm, arms outstretched in defense. Still, the blast's power was overwhelming. Despite Valel's shield, they were shoved forward, tumbling into the alley. Sora hit the ground hard, pain jolting through him. He scrambled up, vision blurred for a moment, but quickly clearing. "What the hell was that?" he gasped, voice rough. Valel was already up, energy crackling around him. His eyes narrowed as he scanned their surroundings. "I don't know, but we need to stay sharp." Viridia rose next, brushing dirt off with a sharp breath. Her grip on her sword tightened. "We're not sitting here," she said firmly. "We need to move." The alley stretched before them, narrower and darker now, the shadows pressing in like a living thing. The city's noise was gone, replaced by heavy silence and the sound of their breathing. Then, a figure emerged from the deepest shadows. The group tensed, backs instinctively turning to cover each other as their eyes darted between the newcomer and the alley entrance. They didn't know if a fight was coming, but one thing was clear. They needed to protect each other. Sora's heart hammered as he glanced back toward the alley entrance. There, standing still and silent, was a hooded figure, motionless as the very air. The figure seemed to drain the life from the space around it, the world holding its breath. The kids braced themselves, defensive stances forming naturally. Kaori's hands hovered, ready to call healing magic. Viridia's sword was drawn in an instant, posture rigid with focus. Valel's energy flickered faintly at his fingertips, eyes sharp and locked on the figure. "Who are you?" Sora's voice broke the silence, steady but edged with unease. No answer came. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if measuring them, the hood shadowing its face. Viridia's grip tightened on her sword. "Don't just stand there," she snapped. "Say something." Suddenly, the figure moved, a blur of motion, swift and silent. It lunged. Viridia reacted instantly, raising her sword to block the assault. The blades clashed, the force rattling her arms and skidding her feet back, but she held firm. "Not so fast!" she growled, eyes sharp. Sora surged forward, energy flaring around his fist. He unleashed a blast of raw power, striking the figure square in the chest. The attack knocked the figure back several steps, ripples vibrating through the air. For a brief moment, the alley was silent again, but the figure was not done. Valel's energy surged next. He thrust his palm forward, releasing a volley of crackling energy missiles. They streaked through the air, hitting the figure one after another. The figure staggered, its body jolting under the impact. "Get away from them!" Valel commanded coldly. The figure flickered in the dim light, absorbing the blows with no visible harm but pushed back enough to create distance. Viridia did not lower her sword. "It's not finished," she warned. "That thing's dangerous." Kaori stepped forward, brows furrowed. "We need to know what it wants. It's not attacking randomly." The figure said nothing, standing rigid in the alley's center, tension coiled in its posture. No pain, no emotion showed beneath the hood, only faint breaths in the silence. Sora's fists sparked anew, defensive stance steady. "This is just the beginning," he muttered. Tension thickened like a living thing. Whatever the figure was, it was far from ordinary. As dust settled, debris clattered softly. A faint haze hung until a gust swept it away. The shredded cloak that once covered the figure lay at her feet. What now stood before them shocked the group into silence. Sora's breath caught. Viridia froze, sword trembling in her grasp. Across from them stood someone identical to Viridia. Same sharp eyes, same strawberry blonde hair, now longer and pulled back tighter. Same height and frame, down to every detail. But her presence was heavier, fiercer. Her aura crackled with focused energy, distorting the air like heat waves. Behind her floated swords made of condensed energy, glowing softly and humming with menace. Valel stepped protectively in front of Kaori. "What the hell?" he muttered. Viridia opened her mouth, but no words came. Her grip tightened, eyes locked onto the stranger. Kaori whispered, "She looks just like you." "No," Viridia said quietly but firmly. "She isn't me." Sora's energy flared again, defensive stance ready. "Then who is she?" The girl remained silent, face unreadable, body still. The floating energy blades shifted, glowing brighter. One thing was clear, this was far from over. Viridia took a single step forward, her sword still raised, heart pounding louder than ever. "Who are you?" Her voice cut through the alley like a blade, not shouted, but sharp, carrying disbelief, confusion, and something deeper, something unsettled. The figure didn't answer. She didn't move. She only stared, expression unreadable beneath strands of hair that matched Viridia's exactly. The silence was unbearable. It wasn't just tense, it was wrong. Like the air itself had warped with this girl's arrival. Sora glanced at Viridia, then back at the doppelganger. "This can't be a coincidence," he muttered, fists clenching. "She's not just some random attacker." "No kidding," Valel said under his breath, keeping Kaori behind him while tracking the hovering swords glowing behind the girl like silent sentinels. "This is something else entirely." Kaori reached out, placing a steadying hand on Viridia's back. "She hasn't said anything," she whispered. Maybe she doesn't mean to hurt us." Viridia didn't respond immediately. Her gaze locked with the girl's, same eyes, same posture, but no warmth, no flicker of recognition, just intense, unwavering focus. "That blast wasn't a greeting," Viridia said coldly. "She came at me." Her hands tightened around her hilt, knuckles pale. She knew what she was doing. The girl didn't flinch or blink. The energy swords behind her pulsed faintly, drifting as if alive, always ready to strike. "Say something," Viridia shouted, frustration breaking through. "You show up out of nowhere, looking like me, and you don't even have the decency to explain why?" Still, no reply. Kaori's eyes darted to Sora, who shifted his stance subtly, preparing for whatever might happen next. Sora nodded once. "We stay together." "Yeah," Valel added, eyes narrowing. "And we don't let her get the first move this time." Viridia's shoulders rose and fell with her breath, chest tight with anger and uncertainty. "Whoever you are, you're not walking away without answers." Yet the girl remained silent, unmoving, her eerie, floating swords aligning behind her like the calm before a storm. Then, without hesitation, without a word, the look-alike moved. One moment still, the next a blur of motion, dashing toward them with terrifying speed. Her energy blades surged forward, trailing streaks of glowing light through the alley's shadows. Viridia braced herself. Sora's energy flared in his palms. Valel's magic swelled, readying a counterstrike. But just as she closed the distance, mere feet away, the sky split with a sudden violent shockwave. Boom. Something fell. A deafening blast cracked through the alley as a massive force crashed to the ground between them and the charging figure. Dust and debris flew, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The shockwave rattled windows, shaking the air. The girl skidded to a halt mid-charge, energy blades halting abruptly, their glow flaring bright. A cloud of smoke and dust filled the space between them, dense and thick, obscuring the impact site. The ground cracked and cratered, faint steam rising. Everyone stood frozen, even the look-alike. Sora's hand raised, charged but unmoving. Valel's magic fizzled, wide eyes fixed on the dust cloud. Kaori's hands hovered near her chest, trembling, not with fear, but from tension. Viridia stared, blade held high, heart pounding. Not from the charge, but because even she hadn't seen what fell. "What was that?" she whispered. No answer. The alley was silent again, except for the hiss of settling dust and a low hum of energy. Slowly, the dust cleared. The outline of a figure emerged in the crater's center, broad-shouldered, calm, unmoving, despite the chaos. Jing. He stood tall, eyes locked on the girl who looked like Viridia, his usual calm sharpened into razor focus. His jacket fluttered from the residual shockwave. His presence alone seemed to alter the air. He hadn't looked at the kids yet, his attention never wavering. With a flick of his wrist, Jing raised one hand, fingers glowing with intricate lines of pulsing energy. In an instant, the world shimmered. A ring of light spun outward, expanding into a dome that blinked into place. A curtain of mirrored energy sealing Jing and the girl inside a closed space. City sounds muffled, the alley outside dimmed as if time bent around them. The look-alike reacted instantly, her head whipping around, eyes scanning for an exit. One energy blade fired backward, striking the dome's edge. It rebounded harmlessly. She leapt upward, but the energy barrier bent and repelled her back to the ground like gravity had turned against her. Trapped. She landed silently, crouched low and tense, blades circling like predatory birds. For the first time, uncertainty edged her posture. She hadn't expected this. Jing stepped forward inside the dome. "No more running," he said coldly, voice echoing unnaturally inside the sealed space. "You're not touching them." Outside the barrier, the kids watched, unable to hear or reach him. The energy field rippled between them like a one-way mirror. Sora took a step forward. He closed them off. He's going to face her alone. Viridia's voice was low, stunned. He moved before she could strike again. Kaori touched the barrier gently. Her fingers met resistance like water made of solid light. "He's protecting us." Valel's jaw tightened. No, he's containing her. Inside the dome, the two figures stood at a standoff, mirror images of power and purpose. And for the first time, the girl looked hesitant,